I want to talk to you about something today that I don't see a lot about on YouTube, stuff like that. Now, I haven't searched a whole lot about this, but I know it's one of those things that it's everybody has their own take on it, and I think it's just good to share another opinion. So I've been doing I'm going to talk about instrument tone, guitar tone, violin tone, all this stuff all goes together. Now, there's a lot that can go into this. And this is one of the funnest parts about being a builder. Now, I don't show a lot of my building process on my channel, but I do build. I do a lot of repair. And so that's where most of my time and my effort tends to go to. But I do a lot of it. And that's one of the cool things like that I can do, or that I have learned to do over the years that I've been doing this. Now, so like I said, I've been building for 22 years. Now I'm not the most prolific of builders. There are plenty of guys out there that build way more than I do. That's because I run a repair shop. You can see repairs over here. I'm actually fixing a cable as we speak. Down below, you can't see it, but I'm working on that a little bit as we talk. Because I don't have a lot of free time. So this is how we're gonna do it. Anyway, so guitar tone. Now, if we're talking acoustics, we're talking electrics, there are differences between the two. Now, one of the things that you will find when we'll talk acoustic first, and then we'll talk electric. Now, acoustic guitars, this is all depending on the instrument itself. So the wood you're using, the strings you're using, how you play. Now, tone, when you're talking about a tone of acoustic guitar, the answer is everything makes a difference. 100% of that guitar is what's making your tone. Just each individual part is a proportion or a percentage of that tone. Now, so if we look at it that way, the top of the guitar is probably going to give you rough estimates. There's guys out there that have like broke this down into like percentages, but from my experience, like the top is going to give you, so just the top plate, so where the bridge is attached, the strings go into, that type of stuff, you're going to get like 50% of your tone from that piece. So that's an important piece to get right, and it's an important piece to like get like good quality wood and good workmanship, because that's like the lion's share of it. Now, that being said, so then, okay, you take 50% of that tone is the top. 50%, the other 50% is the rest of the guitar. So you're going to break that down into different percentages. So if you want to talk like what kind of tone do I want, you need to decide like if you like a spruce tone, a cedar tone, redwood tone, mahogany tone, and they do all kinds of crazy Douglas fir, they do all kinds of cypress, all kinds of different woods, and each one's a little bit different. Now, there's always exceptions to those rules. Like spruce is probably Engelmann spruce, Sitka spruce, Albertian spruce, white spruce, red spruce, black spruce. There's all kinds of spruces out there that they can make woods or make instruments out of. So in the violin world, Engelmann spruce is king by far, because Engelmann spruce is very light, very strong, and very bright. And for a bowed instrument, they want that projection. They want that tone to jump out there. Now, Engelmann is also, excuse me, choking on my own spit. Engelmann is very light and very, very stiff. Really it is. And so, if you make a guitar out of that, you're going to end up with a very bright guitar. Now, not super bright, but brighter. Like you can do brighter woods than that. But that one is a fairly bright one. Excuse me. Take a drink so I quit choking. Anyway, so then Engelmann. So your most common in your guitar is Sitka spruce. Now, Sitka spruce is a great option for guitar. It's a little warmer sounding. It's a little more flexible, and that comes into the tone. Now, as we talk about that, this is so complicated, and there are so many things that make differences along the way. Now, if we talk Sitka spruce, okay, generally spruce. We'll just start with spruce. I'm not saying what kind. So if we talk spruce, spruce is technically a softwood. Now it has two distinct grains, or, growth rings as it goes. You have the hard winter ring and then the softer summer ring. And so you have these two different textures, which makes it really rigid in one axis and not the other. So you can get these really cool, that's why you see, like in guitars, you see the X brace. That's to make it rigid across, sideways. Lengthwise, it really doesn't need it. The grain holds that structure as long as it's a good split, or the grain structure is lined up in the plate. Now that being said, hang on. All right, I grabbed the guitar top I'm working on so we can object lesson. Okay, here we go. So the grain in this top, I'll see if I can hold it close, look through the sound hole. There you are. You'll see the grain is running vertically through the guitar plate. So here's your sound hole. Obviously, this is a big square. So the grain is running this direction. And the split, see if you can, I don't know if you can really see it on this piece. The edges are kind of ragged, but the grain is actually this direction through the blade. So running vertically, grain comes up and through. So in this orientation, if you flex it this way, so I'm bowing it this way, it's already stiff. It doesn't need a lot of help. But if I try to flex it this way, it's very flexible. Now this is obviously a little more rigid because I've already started gluing the X pattern on it. But that's why you see a lot of these X's. So this X in an acoustic guitar is spreading that tension out. So we can get that plate down to, this is roughly about 1/8 of an inch thick. It's a little bit thinner, but that's close enough for most people. 1/8 of an inch, or about 2.5 millimeters. I run a metric too. But anyway, so now that we have the main X, this is the big, so they call it X bracing. So this is the main X. These are the lower transverse bars. These are finger braces that'll go here. You have the upper transverse bar and the upper face graft. Now, these are more or less neck support. That's what they do. They support the neck, the end of the fingerboard, fretboard, that's coming over, from the body junction out here over to the sound hole. That's what that does. These are all tone. This is just support. These don't do a whole lot in tonally. Not to say that you can't make them do something, but I don't choose to make them do much because you don't want to make the structure too stiff. If you make the structure too stiff, then it cannot vibrate, or it will vibrate, but it takes a lot of effort. You end up with guitars that tend to be kind of closed sounding. So like you have to put a lot of force, you really have to hit it to get it to go. Now, these two, the lower transverse bars, these you can do a lot with tone. And also the way you shape the X. I choose to do an X that's fairly thin. Like these are fairly beefy right now. These are just glued in. I haven't shaped these yet. So they're very blocky, very, very stiff right now. Like there is no flex in this top. But that's okay because I do tap toning when I build. So tap toning is where I'm gonna hold this plate. Once I get all the rest of these glued in, I'm gonna hold the plate right about here. I'm gonna tap it and it will actually make, oh, you can hear that through the mic. It will actually make a tone. Now I'm sure the microphone just sounds like thud, thud, thud. When you get these down, when you start shaping these braces, and that's the, oh man, is that so fun? That is the funnest part. You start shaping the braces, and I gotta do a video on that. Because that is one of the funnest things I do. You start shaping these braces down, you start doing the contours. I cut down, some of this brace here, leave it higher in some places, taper them, do all this other stuff in here. And as you tap tone it, all of a sudden you just hear this tone come in. And you're looking for, and this is depending on the builder. Some builders choose a note. They will tune this top to a note. They want it to ring at F sharp, G, E flat, E, whatever their choice may be. So they're looking for a particular note, and you can totally do that. You can tap these, and it's just like a marimba. Bing, you hit it and it rings, which is great. And so you will have a particular tone that top really likes. Now, I choose to do it just a little bit differently. I don't worry about the note so much, more that it is ringing freely. And that basically what I'm meaning is like, you tap the top and it rings, like it vibrates, it has a long sustained note. because I have noticed as I've built in my violin making, they like to do a note. Like they like to have a particular note that they tune that plate to. And what I noticed in my building, and especially as I went more into the guitar world, depending on the top, they have a note they like to ring at. And you just have to find that note. So I tend to more to go shave to it and be like, okay, it's ringing a little better, shave a little more out of here. Oh, it's not done as quite as what I want, so I'm gonna take a little more out of this area, whatever, however you want to look at it. And as I go about that process, you tend to find a note where it just starts to ring very freely. And that's gonna give you a very open tone. So you strum the strings, it doesn't take much effort. Some people call that lively, something along those lines. And so you get this guitar that doesn't take a lot of effort to play. So some of my instruments you can actually overplay. If you hit them too hard, like you really strum into them, the tone will start to kind of break up, and give you kind of, it won't sound as nice. Whereas other guitars that are like heavier braced, you have to hit them hard. Like you gotta strum them, and all of a sudden they'll speak because it took that much energy to get that top to run. Because we're looking at a lot of physics in a guitar top. In the guitar top, the top, so your bridge is going to be mounted right about here. And as that, the strings come down and go into the bridge, and as it's played, that top actually teeters like this. It actually starts to go like a seesaw. Now this is all like microscope, like you'd have to get super good cameras to catch this on film where this bridge actually rocks. But they have put these things through, super high speed cameras and, sensors and all that hoopla, and they strum it and they watch this bridge go, just teeter like this. And it becomes this like pumping action. And so if you think about the plate in that aspect, you now change the bracing because you want that top to articulate. You want that motion, because that's what's going to drive that tone. So the more you can get that top to do that great, smooth motion, the more tone you're going to get out of this guitar. And that is like I said, that is one of the funnest things. You sit there and you go and you work and you shave and you plane all this stuff off, and then all of a sudden you're like, boom, there it is. Like you found it. Now, that's basics of top. Okay. Now you can change a lot of this stuff. There's little nuances all over in there. You can change, there's a bridge patch that's not in here yet. Changing that material will change the tone. You can change the type of bracing you're doing here. If you like, spruce is by far most common because it's weight to strength ratio. Beautiful, beautiful choice. I always use spruce just because I like that tone. I like that liveliness. But you can change by how thick the plate is, how heavy these are, like how much tapered, how tall they are, what kind of shape you do here, what kind of shape you do on the lower transverse, what pattern you do on the lower transverse. There's many different patterns down here. So like the X is the same. This you can change and change the tone. Now, even in the X, if you change the pitch of the X, you change the tone. If you change the position of the X up and down, you change the tone. So there are a ton of things you can do and just really like nuance down this just the top plate. That's all we've talked about so far. It's just the top plate. About changing the tone. And then, of course, like the top material, change the tone. Now, we got that set. So that's like 50% of your guitar. The other 50% is the rest of the guitar. So how much difference does it make changing those things? It makes a difference. How much of a difference is the problem? And no one will agree on this. And that's okay, because I think every guitar is a little bit different because of you're never gonna find two pieces of wood that are the same. Even if you're cutting like the same tree, I'm gonna cut from the same tree. Well, the tree density changes from the north side to the south side because of which side gets more sun, which side gets more water, what side's faces, blah, 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 blah. So they are never the same. How high it is off the ground versus how low to the ground. It changes the density of the wood. So you're not gonna ever find those two. Like I have cut sister plates. Like I have a piece of wood, 2 inches thick, slicing guitar plates off of it, and they're both a little different. Now, are they vastly different? No, but they're a little, and then, all those little differences, like oh, I didn't, this brace was, you know, a tenth of a millimeter narrower than the other plate. So that made a difference. So it's too hard to calculate down like this is what this does. But you know, you have generals of how to manipulate this stuff. The back is the next big chunk of it. Now, I won't say that it's like, that one I haven't really decided like how much difference this makes, because it's like it's the overtones and the overtones and how much punch or how much, you know, volume the guitar has is really what the back does. So there's two different ideas of guitar backs. One, reflective back. This is the guitar back that is extremely stiff. The plate is thick, the bracing is tall, and it makes the back extremely stiff. And so the sound, you know, the top moves, it's moving the air. It comes, basically that sound wave comes down, hits the back, and reflects. It is a super hard surface that it can focus the tone and push it back out the sound hole. So you end up with a very, you know, very, we'll say percussive, good word for it, very poppy. Like you can strum that guitar and it's a cannon, you know, boom, you hit it, you get that tones jumping out the front, you can hear it at the back of the auditorium. But you can even adjust that. So you can do, depending on the type of bracing you do, will you know, so like if you do the same height bracing out of mahogany or spruce, you're gonna get a slightly different tone out of those two. So you can pick how much you want, how many braces you do. If you do 4, 3, if you do an arched back, if you do a 25-foot radius, a 30-foot radius, a 50-foot radius, those things all change that along with the top. So I do 30-foot radius on the top, 15 on the back. Gotta think. 15 on the back, 30 on the top is the two radiuses that I use. Your most common is 25 and 50. I like the 30 because it's just a little bit warmer. And by warmer, I mean like more mids, more bass. So then the second guitar back, responsive. So this is a guitar plate, top's gonna move, send down the sound wave, you know, through the body, gonna hit the back, and the back is going to move with it. So it's going to slightly change that sound wave that's coming out. Now, you do tend to lose a little bit of the punchiness. Like it's not as it's not as prominent as of a tone. That doesn't mean you can't hear it. Like the guitar will be plenty loud, but it's not as punchy. Like you're not gonna hit it and get that like boom out of it. You're gonna hit it and be like warm, silky tone, you know. And depending on how responsive you make that back is how much clarity you're gonna keep with it. So I like to do a little bit of both, in the aspect that I make the backs thinner. I use spruce bracing, which does make them a tad brighter, but brace it down enough, like make the brace thin and short enough that the back still has a little bit of response in it. So I'm kind of treading in between there too. And I like it because we kind of end up with a very well-rounded guitar. It's plenty punchy, like it's got plenty of volume. But at the same point, it's not percussive. You know, there are plenty of guitars out there that you strum and they just kind of go bang, and that's it. You don't have any sustain in the guitar. I like that sustain. And that responsive back kind of helps those like overtones to come in and fill those empty areas. Back, sides. Sides are one of those things where they don't do a lot for tone. Sides are structural. Not to say you couldn't make them do something, but they're in the wrong orientation. So top, back, sides are here. Sound is going straight down, back up. So the sides really aren't in any orientation to move that or change that tone. And I've had better luck isolating the ribs. So we use reverse kerfing, or I do. I use reverse kerfing, which isolates the sides from the top and the back. So the top and the back move freely, more, you know, relatively freely. They can't move freely because they're attached to the sides. Top, back, they can move more freely, and the sides really don't interact with them much. And I prefer that just because you tend to get a really nice even guitar, because you don't have the interference of the top wanting to talk to the back through the ribs, which could change the, it does to some extent because there is still, contact all the way through. But it's less if you isolate them a little bit. So you get less feedback between the two. So that's what I like to do with ribs. So ribs are a lot of structural. So you see a lot of laminated ribs, solid top, solid backing, custom guitars. And it's because the ribs they're there. They're pretty. You can show off in them. You can do inlays, fancy binding, purflings, all that type of stuff. Tonally wise, there's the structure. So the next part, the neck. So the neck of the guitar, that is another kind of, it's a chunk. It's not a large portion, but it is a portion. So like the neck joint, whether you have a bolt-on or a dovetail or a mortise or whatever, a Spanish heel. Spanish heels are probably the best, but they're the hardest. I don't do Spanish heels. I've done 4 or 5 and decided they're a lot of fuss. Not that you can't get good tone out of them. They're actually probably the best tone. Spanish heel is where you cut a slot in the sides of the neck and the ribs come up into the slots. So the neck block and the neck are the same piece of wood. There is no joint in there. The other reason I don't like those, you can't reset the neck. Something goes wrong with the neck, it's a new guitar time. So I don't use those for kind of that reason. I like a dovetail. Now dovetails, I use my own dovetail, not the standard pitch dovetail like this. Mine's a little more straight. So it's kind of a cross between a mortise and a dovetail. Extremely tight. I can, when I set the dovetail, I can string the guitar up without glue in the neck. It's that tight. It won't go anywhere. So that's the joint I like there. Now the neck material, I like doing laminated necks just because it makes them stiff and rigid. So you get a lot of sound transfer from the nut because that's the other end of the strings. One end of the strings is on the bridge, one is on the nut. So if you're only gathering the tone from the saddle, there's another 50% of that string vibration that's not being used. So you might as well use it. So make a stiff, rigid neck so that sound can transfer. Those vibrations could go down into the body. And the top and the back are attached to the neck block, so you get a little bit of cross transfer. And basically, they're just going to add like overtones. And not really like bad overtones. It's just going to make it sound like a little fuller, we'll say. Just fuller tone. Anyway, and so depending on the wood you get, depends on what range you're coming in with. Maples are going to be, you're going to get more of the high tones. Mahoganies are going to get more of the low tones. You can do the laminates. I tend to get a little bit of both because I'm using maple and usually walnut or mahogany or something like that. So I'm getting a little bit of both through there. Covering all my bases. Nut and saddle. Nut and saddle. Those are have a fairly, I won't say significant, but they make a big difference. Or they make a difference, not a big difference. And they make a difference because that is your contact point. Your string that is vibrating is what's causing this whole thing to move. So depending on the materials of your nut and your saddle, and that's the two little pieces that the strings rest on the guitar, they transfer the tone. That is your first, like, from the string to the body, that's your first contact to transport. So use a good material. I like bone. I have used ivory. I have used man-made stuff, synthetic, Tusk, Graft Tech, New Bone, micarta, plastic. I hate plastic. Just because it breaks down and you don't get all the you should out of the strings. I like bone. And the reason I like bone is it's not as hard as like the Tusk material. Now Tusk is great if you have a guitar that is, we'll say, a little more muffled or a little bassy and you want to brighten it up. Put that on there, you get more trebles. So it cleans up your guitar, makes it tighter, makes it great. If you have a really bright guitar, go down to like your bones, or you could even go into like the graphite nut and saddles. Those warm them up a ton. Now, the other thing, fingerboard material, fretboard, sorry, violin word. Fretboard material. Fretboard material makes a difference because it's the stiffness of the neck. Same with the bridge. Depends on how much you want to transfer. As that sound transfers through the saddle to the bridge to the top, depending on that material, it colors the tone a little bit. Same with the fingerboard, or fretboard. When we're talking fretboard, now we also have to talk frets. Fret material makes a difference. I have seen it. I have heard it. I built a guitar. It was my third guitar. Guy that purchased it, I put in standard fret wire. The first time when I built it, I put in standard fret wire. The guy wore them out in a year, like flat wore them out. So he changed them out, and I said, I don't want to refret this in a year. I'm going to use stainless steel. We put stainless steel in there, and so we played it the same day. Played it in the morning before I took out the strings. Played it as soon as I put the strings back on. Different guitar. Not by like a lot, but like more trebles were there because that stainless steel could transfer more tone, more trebles into the body. Through the board, down the neck, in the body. Made a difference. So it does make a difference. Same with binding on your guitar. Binding is that decorative edge. Binding does make a difference. No one will agree on how much, but we all agree that it does make a difference. Because when you're building a guitar, you have the rib structure, you get it done, you get the top and the back done, you glue them on, you can tap the top, it will ring like a drum. Bong, you know, that type of stuff. It will ring. You route the binding edge, it goes clunk. No tone, no reverberation, no sustain. Obviously it does something. You glue the binding back on, it all comes back. So do you need binding? Not especially. You could do it without. It does make it's a structural difference. Also looks. So like you can just bind it with any material, you know, even with the same side as the back, and it would disappear. You wouldn't see it. And that would do the structural part, but not the aesthetics. So that's why you see different colors just for aesthetics. But yeah, then of course there's always like the way the headstock is shaped. If you have a sawed or a slotted, or that stuff changes a little bit. How heavy the tuners are will make a difference. And then of course your strings. Now your strings, you will see, that is the thing that you can change the most about your guitar because they're cheap. So like when you buy your guitar and you're like, I want this a little bit, you know, I want a little more trebles, then get an 80-20 set of bronze strings. And it's with, you know, same thing. If it's too bright, then get a set of like phosphor bronze. Anyway, all right. I've taken like 30 minutes to talk about this. That is like guitar tone, like how we think about guitar tone as a builder. And you can always manipulate this stuff depending on what you're after. Now, doing commission work is always hard that way because someone will come in and say, I want a guitar that sounds like this. Now, how do you make that? And that's the problem. And that's the part that's the absolute hardest as a builder, is to have someone come to you and like, I want this, you know, rich chocolatey tone. Okay. I can like make that to what I think that is. But that doesn't mean that that's what they think it is. So that is the hard part. Looks are easy. Looks, I mean, they want it black. Great, paint black. It's done. So that's the easy part. The hard part is always meeting an expectation. And there's a lot of builders that do that. And then there's a lot of builders that are like, no thanks, I build them, you like them as is. Two different ways of looking at it. I will say the guitars that I like the most that I've ever built are the ones that I have just built for, like, on my own, like no input from other people. But then again, they should be. I'm the one making all the decisions for the tone that I'm looking for. It's not that I am looking for a tone that someone else is looking for. So, that being said, when and if you ever go looking for your own like custom made guitar, have that in mind. Your idea of tone may not be his idea of tone, even if you try to explain it really, really well. Also, as a builder, you get thrown curveballs occasionally. My 4 guitars ago, I built this guitar. It was supposed to be a smaller body guitar, which in general, the smaller the body, the brighter, more trebly the tone. But we were trying to get it to where we wanted it warmer. Like we were talking back with the customer and me as far as what we were expecting. And we both went into this knowing that it's probably going to be a little bit brighter. He had dreadnoughts, he had other things, so we weren't worried about it being different. Now, as I built, I had that in mind. We need this just a little bit warmer. So I started doing things along the way. I made the rib structure a little taller, which gives it more body volume, which is going to help warm up that tone. I did the responsive back. I used mahogany on the bracing because I wanted it to be a little bit warmer. On the top, I thinned out the top just a little bit to help make it a little bit warmer. I used a little bit thinner mid bracing to make it a little bit warmer. And I figured, I was going to push this thing to not quite a dreadnought, but to maybe almost. And then got this guitar all built. When you tapped it, it sounded a little bright. I was expecting that. It was a European spruce top and myrtle back and sides. And that was the first time I ever worked with myrtle for the back and sides. So it was a little bit of a, I don't know exactly how this is going to work. Anyway, got this thing built, strung it up, played it the first time, went, that's nice. It's a little bright, it's a little warm. That's a great, kind of all around tone. Really loved it. And then I sent it home with the customer. And he comes back a week later and he goes, how did you do it? I'm like, do what? And he's like, it is deeper and warmer than my dreadnought. I'm going, what are you talking about? I just played it like a week ago. It wasn't that dark. He goes, no, you got to hear it. And he comes in and he hands me the guitar and he's like, try it. And I took it and I strummed it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the smoothest, warmest, roundest tone, and this should not be in that small a body. This thing should be like, on a jumbo or something, but it's not like a huge tone because that body is still small. So it can't like punch, like the big like dreadnought guitars, but it's just like super deep and rich, warm tone. And, when we put a pickup in it, you run it through the amplifier, man, that guitar sounds like it's in your lap. It is so just so luscious. And it's one of the guitars that I bright to dark. I planned on it being about here. This thing was like down here, like total out of left field. Didn't plan on it. No idea how to repeat it. I'll almost promise if I tried to repeat it, I wouldn't get there again. It's that the cosmos aligned and everything worked. And I don't know why. And those are I love those, but they're frustrating because you're looking at it like, I want to do it again, but I don't know how. So you just have to keep trying and figure out what happened. Was it just a fluke piece of wood? Was it the way I braced it that day? Was it those bracing materials? Was it, what happened? And, as I have built instruments before and, I built one and then people played it and they were like, oh, I want one of those too. And you try to build it again. It never works. It never works. As much as you try, it will never work again. And not that you couldn't whittle your way down to it. It's just too hard to repeat. And I swear, the more you try, the worse it gets. The further away you're going to get from it. And I don't know. I haven't figured that part out yet. 22 years, no clue how that works. But that's okay. That's the joy of it. That's the joy of having your guitar. It's yours. That is your guitar. And that's the beautiful thing about handmade instruments, is you get to have your instrument. That is your tone. And that is one of the best feelings. When you finish a project and you strum it the first time, I don't care what it sounds like at all. It does not matter what it sounds like. You strum that guitar the first time. It is the most satisfying thing you've ever done in your life. The only thing more satisfying is holding your kid for the first time. That's more satisfying. It is. But this is second. And it is right up there, finding your significant other, having your, seeing your first kid and having your first instrument that's just it's yours. That is one of the coolest things. And it's really crazy that way. And I don't know how to explain it. Like it's the Harry Potter experience. You play it and you go, that's it. That's the one. That is the one. So it's really interesting that way. Anyway, I've got to go. I've spent way too long doing this. I'll make a second video about electrics, and it'll be next week sometime. I'm going on a trip. I'll be back sometime. This is later October. So I'll be out of the shop a couple days on a family trip, and then I'll come back and do one next week, and we'll talk about electrics. Electrics aren't as much as you think. They're more pickups than anything. So it's not as fun to talk about. But anyway, keep smiling. Come back anytime, and we will see you someday, somewhere. Have fun.